Minimum standards. What's the impact of minimum standards and warranties? What are minimum standards? A minimum means that contractor 3, 2, and 1 all meet the requirement. Contractor 4 does not. Do we drive performance up when we use minimum standards? No. Why? There's no reason to be up there where contractor number 1 is. And the way we communicate when we use minimum standards is we identify what the minimum is, but we want something much better than that. But all the vendors know that when you use minimum standards and anything above the standard is acceptable, they're going to drive quality which way? Why? Because when you use minimum standards, the owner's thinking the best value is the lowest price. So it creates an adversarial climate. We say minimum, they say maximum. And they're going to spend all their effort as a buyer to ensure that their minimum is met. So what is going to happen here? What's going to happen is the vendors are going to play under the minimum line, and they're going to try to get as far away from that minimum line as possible without being what? Caught. So now the owner has to know exactly what that standard is. The amazing thing about this is the standards are normally made up. And so it's very what? Subjective. It requires decision making, so it's hard to prove. Therefore, the vendors are continually taking that, quote, minimum standard, turning it into a maximum and driving it what? Down. And that is why all of our materials and all of our systems are being degraded. And you have all these different groups, right, setting standards. And what they are, they're trying to identify the physical properties, set guidelines, and put it in specs. And the biggest group of all is ASTM, biggest one. So what they do, they get all the manufacturers to come in, they identify a product, and they try to identify the physical characteristics that that product should have. So basically, what this is it's for exterior silicone coating, waterproofing. And you can see all the physical characteristics on the left-hand side. You can see the ASTM test listed, and you can see all the major manufacturers now who have a silicone coating. Now, basically what they do, they identify what characteristics we're going to check. They identify a test that can measure that characteristic. Then all the manufacturers go back to their plants and they test their own material. Okay, so let's take one of these characteristics, initial tensile strength. All they're going to do is pull this material apart until it breaks. So what you have here is test D412. Manufacturer A, 400 psi. Manufacturer B, 150 to 600 psi. Without knowing anything about the test or about this product, you should know that the spread is what? It's too wide there. So now, what they do is they test their material and then they reconvene. And what they're going to try to do is pick the standard. Now the problem with this is, if you look at initial tensile strength, and you see 400, 150 to 600, 450, 300 to 400, etc., you know that 150 to 600 is what? Invalid. You also know, by logic, that more of their samples measure what? 150 instead of 600. The thing you don't know is, you don't know the exact sample they use to run the tests. Now, if I took a sample and they were specifying 30 mils or 50 mils of the sample, but my sample is actually 100 mils, what happens to my end result number? It's way up. Nobody ever checks the other guy's samples. Okay? So they got these numbers. The next question is, which number is a safe standard to use? Well, the problem is, nobody knows. See, for some material, it's better to be what? Softer. And when it's softer, it has more what? Elasticity. When it's too hard, what happens to it? It might get brittle, it might break, so it'll fail. So the question is, what number is the best number for a silicone coating? And a lot of these applications of the silicone waterproofing coating, it's on another material. Well, the answer is nobody knows what the right number should be. Nobody. And this is what the majority of materials in any industry. Nobody really knows what the optimal is. So, let's say we say, well, let's just take a good average. Let's take 450. And we say 450 is going to be the number. Well, manufacturer A can't sell their material. So they have to go back and modify their material to meet the standard. Well, they're not going to do that. What they're going to do is they're going to take ASTM and the committee to court. And they're going to ask, their lawyer is going to ask some dominant questions. First question they're going to ask is, how do you know that 400 is not good enough? And the answer will be what? We don't know. Next question, how did you come up with 450? And they will have to say what? We just guessed. So then what will the ASTM committee have to do? Accept all the numbers, because they can't prove anything. So basically, that's what ASTM did, and it was off of a lawsuit. So then the ruling was, you get all the numbers together, you put them in a matrix, and you pick the lowest in every category. And that's the standard. That's how the ASTM standards are set. If you knew this, right, you'd realize that ASTM standards for any material are what? Garbage, useless. They don't minimize any risk. So all the manufacturers quickly figure this out, right? They look at the cost, right? They're going to drop. They're going to look at the proposed standard. They're going to look at their characteristics, and they're going to drop it so that they can make it the what? Cheapest way. So they can sell it. And that's it.